Hi, I'm Julie Brown. I graduated from New London in 1986, and I have taught at New London schools for 31 years.
I'm Vicki Trasname, the middle daughter of Lynette and John McGowan, who were teachers you probably had.
Hi, I'm Chris Crawshaw. I'm a 1988 graduate of New London, and this is my 29th year teaching.
My name is Jeff Geist. I graduated from New London High School in 1997.
I'm Allison Yetter. I graduated in 2002, one of the very first class from the new building, and this is my 16th year here at New London.
I'm Casey Held, and I now teach high school English.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Parr. I'm a 2002 graduate of New London. I teach first grade here, and I've taught for about 14 years.
Hi, my name is Marianne Wilson, and I'm a 1987 graduate of New London. I have been an educator since 1994.
Hi, I'm Alice Jarvie, and I graduated from New London in 2010.
Hi, I'm Sarah Thomas, and I am a 1999 graduate of New London High School, and I teach first grade. Now, this is my 16th year.
Zach Parr, I graduated in 2003.
I'm Carolyn Hamilton, used to be Hustis. I'm a 1979 graduate.
Hi, I'm Shelley Caswell. I was a porter. I went through New London. I graduated in 1985. Not only did I graduate from New London, but my children, my father, my great-grandfather, and grandfather, great-grandfather, and all the way down.
Hi, I'm Dawn Burton Ludy. I graduated in 1990.
I'm Zach Johnson, graduated in 1995. I've been teaching here at the school for the last 15 years.
I am Sarah Hicks. I graduated in 2009. I've been teaching for 9 years, but this is my second year at New London. And we moved back here so that our kids could grow up with the same teachers and people that we know.
I decided most of the way through my senior year that I wanted to be a teacher. I was surrounded by good teachers that cared about kids. Always enjoyed having a good coach that worked with me a lot, and some great teachers who are Miss Gregory, Miss Harris, Joe Sexton. I got to spend time with Barb Knoll and some other New London teachers, some of them even graduates in New London. So I was pretty excited when I got the opportunity to come back to New London and work with our kids.
Teachers that probably inspired me are the majority of my elementary teachers. I went to Fitchville, which was a very small part of New London at the time, a branch. We had 12 kids in class, so we had a lot of attention, and it was really nice.
Then Mrs. Van Sickle, who was my first grade teacher, and Mrs. Long, who was my fourth grade teacher. Both of them played huge roles in me wanting to become a teacher and just be as loving and compassionate as they were to me when I was young.
And my most influential teacher that I remember is, I had her for second grade and fourth grade, was Mrs. Jones. And Mrs. Jones always liked to read to us. My favorite story that I remember her reading that I still like to read sometimes to my classes is Mrs. Pigglewiggle.
Looking back, as some teachers that shaped my life, elementary-wise, I had Miss Fuller, and I absolutely love Miss Fuller, and I still love her, and it's awesome that I get to work with her still to this day. High school-wise, Mr. Gregory and Mr. Sexton stick out a lot to me. Mr. Sexton was just an awesome, very respectable person that definitely commanded your attention, and you always gave it to him. Lastly, Mr. Gregory was by far my favorite because I love math. We always joked in high school that Mr. Gregory knew everything, and even though we joked about it, I still think he actually might know everything. Like, I don't think he's ever been stumped a day in his life. So I loved having all those people as teachers for me, and I'm thankful that I get to come back and be part of this amazing place.
One of my favorite teachers really was my dad, who I had for 2 years of high school English and 1 or 2 years of American history even, but he was one of my favorite teachers because I think he was a really good storyteller, even in history class, and I think I had realized that's what was meaningful to me and kind of inspired me to even like to read and then to eventually want to be a teacher, because I see value in stories that I mean, that's our world, right? Retelling the history of the world, whether it be English class or history. And so I really do value somebody that is a good storyteller. And I knew I kind of started to like English in high school, but I have to admit that I never wanted him to know that because I felt intimidated. That I could never, ever live up to, I mean, I always saw him as like the most well-read person you could ever. And even now, I'm like, I could never match probably the reading that he did. And so I always felt like if I had verbalized, I think I want to be an English teacher, I would have almost been doing a disservice to him. Like I was afraid he might have even said, oh no, you can't do that. But here I am.
Some of my favorite teachers from the past are Mr. Gregory, Mr. Marshall, and Mr. Sexton. They were very inspiring, and I've always wanted to be a teacher.
I have lots of influential teachers from growing up. Mrs. Van Sickle, my first grade teacher, and Mr. Booker, my fourth grade teacher. He taught me how to play chess. And Mr. Sexton was amazing, and Mr. Gregory was also amazing. I had so many growing up that inspired me, and I'm just grateful for all of them.
A couple of the teachers that come to mind as inspiring me to become a teacher were Mrs. Eibel and Mrs. Fuller.
I would say my most influential teacher as a student would be in elementary, Peggy Parsons Franz. When I had her in first grade back in the 70s, she was Miss Wilson, and she invited us to her wedding that year. And she also, at the end of the school year, gave me some leftover materials from her classroom to go set up a summer school at home, which sold me on teaching as a profession. In her classroom in first grade was the first time she had me reading with peers that were not quite yet reading. So I got to sit with my classmates and help them catch up on some of the reading skills we needed to move on to second grade. And then another influential educator for me would be Carolyn Hamilton. In the mid-1990s, I was her para-educator, and she encouraged me to keep going and getting my licensure to be a teacher for a classroom as well. And being able to work at her side showed me that this was definitely the field for me. And then moving on, I would say that Patty Fuller would be another influential educator because not only was she a teacher for my own child and my son and my grandson, but as I've been pursuing my doctorate degree, she has been an influential mentor to me in the types of studies that I would need to do to explain how students best learn and the interventions needed to encourage those readers who are struggling. So those are the things that really matter to me. And I think for me, the best beginning for education was my own parents, who were the ones who taught me to read before I even went to school. So I think that having those foundations in learning are just important for kids, and I love being able to pass that on to kids today.
One of the teachers that inspired me to become a teacher was Mr. Pack. He was my 7th grade science teacher, and he just really encouraged me and gave me interest in just the earth and things that we were able to see on a daily basis. I can remember looking at an eclipse through Mr. Pack's telescope, and so that was kind of fun. And from that point on, that's just something that I can remember looking back on my schooling. And then we had Mr. Hammond and Mr. Sexton and those guys that really just inspired me to become a science teacher.
I had my mom for kindergarten and loved it, and then had my dad for high school English and world history, I believe. And as Casey alluded to, probably being in my dad's history class, I learned a lot of things about him that I might not have learned just being at home, because he might not have shared those stories just at home, because it was very emotional for him talking about being in the war and stuff. So in that regard, it kind of helped me get to know my dad. I know that sounds weird, but he was a pretty quiet man at home. And I think it was difficult for him to talk about it, but in class, he felt safe talking about it. So in that regard, I get chills. And as you all know, he left us all too soon. So my mom and dad certainly were two of my favorite teachers. And then one other favorite teacher was Mrs. Long. I had her for 3rd grade, and I just remember her beautiful handwriting on the board. And I was just always inspired to want to be able to write like Mrs. Long, who was also a New London graduate, Susan Miller.
And I became a teacher because of Mrs. Eibel and Mrs. Fuller.
I was blessed to have some pretty amazing educators at New London, and really that's the reason that I became an educator and came back to New London. I remember in particular Joe Sexton and Rob Gregory, who were both at the tail end of their careers. I think they both retired when I was in high school, but just the impact they made at even a short period of time, and Joe Pack in middle school. I was fortunate to be surrounded by some great people, and that inspired me to come back and teach in New London.
I started at Clarksfield in kindergarten with Mrs. McGowan, now his mom. Then I moved to Fitchville, and I had Mrs. Pearl, Mrs. Gans, Mrs. Strang, and then I moved into New London, and I had Mrs. Ringler and Miss Chandler and Mrs. Knight and Miss Robinson. So those are some older teachers that have been around. And I especially remember Miss Robinson, because she would always, or Robbins, she would read us stories after recess, and I remember Johnny Tremaine. So yeah, they were all great. They all had influence on us. So.
Well, definitely Mr. Gregory's up there. I've had a lot of great teachers at my experience at New London schools, from Mrs. Parsons, Mrs. Sloan, Miss Swicker, to Mrs. Todd, Mr. Scladden, Mr. and Mrs. Gregory. I mean, the list goes on, and I apologize if I omitted any of the great ones. But Mr. Gregory in calculus class, I'll never forget that he would always put our scores on the board after we take it. Obviously, our names were not associated with the scores, but you always knew who they were. I was typically somewhere in the middle, depending on the unit that was discussed. But he was always entertaining hell's bells.
And I did not have my mom in kindergarten. Both of my sisters did, and I did not. But even though not having her as my teacher, definitely the fact that she was a teacher and a kindergarten teacher definitely, I think, impacted us at an early age. Learning even the importance of going to school, of education, reading our library books. Reading our library books is a big, I think a big part of
And I
our
think
growing
too,
up.
living in a family of 2 teachers, summers were always family time, so the thought of having a summer without our parents at home is kind of unusual to think about.
And my most influential teachers were Julie Brown. I worked in her room as a high school student during study hall periods, and she made me want to become a teacher. And of course, Mrs. Fuller, because she taught me how to read in 1st grade. And finally, Miss Mary Lou Harris, who really taught me how to love reading, and that's what I hope to pass on to my students.
So a significant moment from, I think, my junior year of high school was an interaction I had with Mary Lou Harris, who told me, not sure why, but that she saw a lot of potential in me, and that didn't necessarily give me direction in the moment, but it stuck with me for a long time, and it always gave me the confidence, knowing that eventually I'd get my head on straight and do something with my life. So I thank her for that.
Go ahead. Now tell a story, or you want to tell a story?
Okay.
About Mr. Gregory.
Okay. All right, you're supposed to prompt me with some questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Dawn, would you mind telling a story about Mr. Gregory? Who were your favorite teachers?
Okay.
Let's start there.
My sister Wendy and Dawn were extremely intelligent when it came to math. I am not. Wendy was salutatorian in New London in 1990. Dawn was valedictorian in 1993. I was neither. And math was a very sore subject. However, because my sisters were smart, they put me in the advanced math classes thinking that I would be too. So I'd like to present to you my impression of Mr. Gregory asking me questions during an equation, and he was so kind in helping me not humiliate myself on a daily basis. Is everybody ready? Okay. Y equals 3x minus 2. Y is correct. Y to the 6th power plus cosine of x. And to find then cosine of x, what do we need here? Mr. Ebinger? Are you with us? Yeah. Do you have an answer? Seven. Not looking for a number. Also, Y is correct. Got it? No? Okay.